Well, I had a birthday a couple weeks ago, and being on the other side of 60, slightly on the other side of 60 now, it is easy to get nostalgic. A few years ago, somebody sent me one of those little booklets that says, "What was life like in the year you were born?" 1963, which reminded me of all the stuff that we used to rely on that is now obsolete. Back in the day, for news, we used to wait for the newspaper to show up. In our place, it showed up on the afternoon, or we'd wait for Walter Cronkite to tell us what was going on in the world after supper time. That's the way it is, and that's the way it was. As kids, we did research using an encyclopedia, and we looked up books in the library with actual cards in a card catalog. We used rotary dial phones that were attached to the wall. People could not get a hold of you at any given moment. In fact, you could only go as far as the phone cord would allow you to go. Thinking about all that makes me feel really old. I realize that I am now at the get off my lawn stage of life. But it's also amazing to think about how rapidly things have changed. Think about the fact that in your pocket right now is a device that allows you to access virtually all the available information in the world. Think about that. That was a fantasy 60 years ago. That was something that you only saw on the Jetsons, which is another very old sentence. Some of you are going, what are the Jetsons? There was a cartoon back in the day where they had video calling, which we thought was never going to happen. You know, where they had flying cars and drones and robots and all that stuff that we thought would never come to pass. But here it is. I'm still waiting for my flying car, though, waiting for that to happen. But, you know, that was a fantasy. But now, you want to know anything, all you have to do is Google it. It's a new verb we've added to the vocabulary. Now, Google has been around for less than 30 years. Did you know that? It's not been around that long. But it's been supplying answers to life questions. Questions we didn't even know that we had. Now all we have to do is look it up. And the biggest question that Google has been trying to answer since its inception is the problem of death. In 2013, Time magazine reported that Google had set out to solve the problem of death, another thing that one thinks about on the other side of 60, by the way. According to the article, Google was launching an attempt to solve the problem of human aging and disease with massive data sets designed to give researchers the ability to conquer the one major problem that plagues all of us. So Google set up this company called Calico, which looks at medical problems through the lens of data and the map of the human genome rather than simply bringing another drug to the market. So for the last 11 years, they've been pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into this project. And even though we don't know precisely how they are going to try to defeat death, Time in 2013 gushed about it and saying that if anyone could do it, Google could. Indeed, as the article put it, and I quote, "Who the hell else is going to do it?" That's interesting phrasing. Sure, we're glad for the most part that Google is in our lives, but beating death, that's actually the one problem that we Christians here don't need to Google in order to know the answer, because we know it's already been done. Here again, that verse from Charles Wesley, "Light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings, mild he lays his glory by, born that we no more may die, born to raise us from the earth, born to give us second birth." Indeed, if we truly want to understand the reality of the incarnation, if we want to know what the child in the manger is all about, we have to work backwards from Easter. Only 2 of the Gospels, in fact, mention the birth story of Jesus. All 4 of them focus on Easter. In fact, you can't have Christmas without Easter, really. You can't truly celebrate life until you've dealt with the reality of death. Beating death, though, I think is really the point of the whole Bible when it comes down to it. Some biblical scholars have written about the book of Genesis and looked at its structure and said that Genesis really constitutes what we might call a death sandwich. That it begins in chapters 1 and 2 with the creation of the world and the creation of humans. And then chapter 3, sin enters the world, death enters the world. And then it goes all the way through to chapter 50 when you get to the story of Joseph. And the last chapter of Genesis, Joseph says to his brothers something very profound. You meant this for evil, but God meant it for good to preserve a people. So you have these two messages of life surrounding a stinking center of death. Now we're going to take a deep dive into Genesis starting in January. So consider that a preview. But it's a death sandwich. By the way, I always thought Death Sandwich would be a great name for a heavy metal band. But I Googled it, and there actually is a heavy metal band named Death Sandwich, just so you know. I would argue that it's not just Genesis that contains this death sandwich. It's actually the whole Bible. God creates human sin. They bring death into the world, which reigns through the story until right here at Christmas, Jesus is born. And then he goes out to beat death by dying on a cross and being raised from the dead. The problem is, though, people don't often know what to do with that story, how to put it into perspective. I mean, we have a lot of people who only come to church on Christmas and Easter. And I don't want to run them down because at least they're coming, right? I mean, some people call them other things, Cheesters or Creasters or H2O Christians, holidays too only, I don't know. But people will come and they'll experience all that happens and then they'll leave, but essentially unchanged by the message. Yeah, that's something that happened in the past, maybe something that might happen in the future, but wow, now we've got presents to wrap, we've got pies to be baked, we've got problems to be solved. Well, in this Christmas hymn, Charles Wesley calls us to look deeper, to look under the layers of all the Christmas decorations and trappings that we've put on top of it, to discover the real operative principle of Christmas and of beating death. Worshiping and following the one who can raise us up and give us new birth. Not just in the future, but right now, in the present tense. It's a message that if we grab a hold of it, will solve more problems than Google could ever dare to hope. We see this at work in the story of Lazarus, which admittedly is a strange one to look at during Advent. But it's also a strange story to begin with at any rate. It often appears in the lectionary during the Lenten season, but I think it's an Advent story too. Because everyone in the story is waiting for Jesus to show up. That's Advent. And when he shows up, things happen. In fact, when he shows up, death takes a holiday. Now, if you go back to the beginning of John chapter 11, Jesus is informed that his friend Lazarus is sick. But this doesn't seem to concern Jesus at all. This part of the story usually makes people uncomfortable. Why didn't Jesus go right away? I mean, we here at the church, when we get a call, somebody's in the hospital, they're in dire straits, we drop everything and go. We're expected to do that. But in this case, Jesus is like, yeah, let's wait a while. And we think, what's that about? Isn't serious illness your number one priority, Jesus? Don't you know that Lazarus could die? But it's a couple days later that Jesus finally says to his disciples, okay, let's go. But he says to them, Lazarus is asleep and we'll go wake him up. And the disciples are kind of dense at this point. They say, well, that's okay. Sleep is good for him. He's getting better then. He'll be fine, right? But Jesus has to tell them plainly, no, Lazarus is dead. Let's go. So Jesus waits till Lazarus dies. He doesn't go right away. And going itself is a dangerous proposition for him too. His disciples know that the religious leaders in Judea want Jesus dead. So if they go there could be two funerals instead of one. In fact, Thomas, the disciple, says, all right, well, I guess we'll go and die with him too. But Jesus shows up. And Lazarus' sisters meet him at the steps of the funeral home. Lord, if you had been here, Martha says, my brother would not have died. And Jesus says to her, you know, your brother will rise again. Yeah, says Martha, I know that someday he'll rise up with everyone else. That's what we Jews believe. It'll happen someday. Doesn't sound very comforting in the moment. Sort of like when people at funerals try to say comforting things. They don't always wind up being all that comforting. I remember when my mom died, people would say to me as a child, you know, as they're 14 years old, saying, well, you know, God must have needed your mom in heaven. Really? The omniscient, omnipresent God of the universe needed my mother to be up there to do what? Bake bread? We need her here. We need her here right now. Seems like kind of flippant. It's about talking about someday, some theoretical kind of thing that doesn't work in that moment. But notice what Jesus does here. He switches the tense on her. He goes away from future and starts talking about the present. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who believes in me will never die. Notice that's all in the present tense. Do you believe this? Then he says to Martha. Martha's thinking about the future. Right now, things are terrible. But Jesus is talking about right now. And Martha says, yes, I believe you're the Messiah, God's Son who is coming into the world. But see, there's this tomb, and he's been in there for 4 days, and there's a smell. I love the way the King James puts it, he stinketh. We've already had the funeral. Where have you been? You're too late. Death won again. She believes the time has passed for Jesus to have done anything. I think that's true for us too. I mean, we understand the theology and principle, but the practical application is elusive. In many ways, Martha's problem is the church's problem. Christmas after Christmas, Easter after Easter, people show up not expecting anything to happen right then. Sure, Jesus did some great things in the past, and maybe he'll do some great things in the future, but what about now? Right now, we're dealing with that funeral, that illness, that issue, that problem. But Jesus doesn't say, someday I will be the resurrection and the life. No. He says, I am, right now. What does it mean for Jesus to be the resurrection and the life in the present? Let's break those down for a moment. Jesus says, I am the resurrection. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. For Jesus to be the resurrection in the present means that his promise is available to us right now. It means that physical death has no power over those who put their faith and trust in Jesus. See, if we believe in resurrection, then we don't have to fear death. And if we don't have to fear death, then we can live our lives to the full right now. The present is manageable because the future is secure. That's what Jesus means when he says next, I am the life. Those who believe in me will never die. Because if Jesus, our present, isn't about waiting around to munch on that inevitable death sandwich. Jesus' resurrection power means that we can live life to the fullest no matter the circumstance because we know that even death in the end cannot stop us. Just a chapter earlier, John 10:10, Jesus said that he had come that we might have life and have it abundantly. In John 3, Jesus told Nicodemus that he had to be born again. That abundant life was new life, a born-again life. Or as Charles Wesley puts it in the hymn, a second birth. See, when Jesus shows up, life breaks out. Life that death can't ever beat. Google is wasting its time trying to find any other solution because it's only in his life, in Jesus' life, that we find life to the full. But somehow that message is tough to get through to the world, even for those who come on Christmas and Easter. Maybe it's because we're not very good with good news. We're skeptical of it these days. We don't really trust it that much. I mean, think about it. Are we happy when our coworker gets a promotion? Do we look at successful people and secretly think they did something nefarious to get to the top? Do we celebrate our neighbor's good fortune? Good news is often bad news unless it's happening to us. Couple that with the fact that everything in our world seems to be focused on death. I mean, open up Google right now on your phones, which I know some of you are doing anyway, but if you were opening up on your phones, you would find probably in the first few things that you Google, someone's talking about death, because it's everywhere. And in a world where everyone's attention is always focused on dying, life is actually a threat. You know, it's interesting. After Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, here's this miraculous raising from the dead. Lazarus walks out of the tomb. It's an incredible miracle, and everybody's astonished except for the religious leaders who say, that Jesus has to die, and so does Lazarus. We're suspicious. It was the last straw for them who wanted Jesus dead. We're suspicious of good news because death is our normal way of understanding the world. It's difficult for us to believe that anything can beat it, be it Google or God. But Christmas and Easter and the whole story of Jesus reminds us that we believe in a God who is good enough and powerful enough to raise the dead and have victory over death itself. Death is not permitted to have the last word with us. That's good news, my friends. And it's good news for everyone. But it's good news only if we believe it, if we embrace it, and we live it. I love the story about the evangelist D.L. Moody, who when he was a young man was asked to preach a funeral sermon. And he'd never done one before, so he started to look through the Bible to find one of Jesus' funeral sermons. But what Moody discovered was that there weren't any funeral sermons of Jesus anywhere in the Bible. Why? Because every time Jesus showed up at the funeral got canceled. He broke up every funeral he ever attended. Death could not exist where he was. And when the dead heard his voice, they sprang to life. He was and is the resurrection and the life. Now here's Jesus' question to Martha. Do you believe this? Remember, Lazarus is still in the tomb when he says this. Do you believe this? Do you believe that death has really been defeated by resurrection? Do you believe that because of Jesus, death won't have the last word with us? Do you believe that Jesus can bring healing even in the most devastating of illnesses? And even if that illness leads to death, which inevitably it does, do you believe in Jesus' promise of resurrection life? Do you believe that addiction that you're dealing with can be redeemed from the hopelessness of death by Jesus Christ, the resurrection and the life? Do you believe that prodigal child of yours can come home, that Jesus can get hold of his or her life and give them a second birth, a second chance? Do you believe that marriage can be healed, resurrected, made new by an encounter with Jesus, who teaches us what it means to have abundant life? Do you believe that Jesus can redeem your financial situation, your job, your strained family relationships? Do you believe that even if that situation doesn't work out exactly in the way that you hoped, that God can make something good come out of it? Do you believe this? See, when the newly resuscitated Lazarus emerged from the tomb, covered in the grave clothes, the stink of death still on him, Jesus says something simple but very profound. He says, unbind him and let him go. See, whatever binds you, whatever keeps the stink of death on you, whatever haunts you, because of Jesus, you can be free. I am the resurrection, and I am the life, he says. And since he rose from the dead, the good news is that anything is possible. In Philippians, Paul says that Jesus set aside his glory to come as a servant and to come and die. Resurrection isn't an abstract, metaphorical idea with him. It's the reality. Can it be that way with us? Do we really believe this? Do we really believe in him? That's a question for us as we wait for his coming in Advent. his birth, his death, his resurrection means that we no more may die. He has come to raise us up, not just on the last day, but now. He's come to give us second birth, a new chance at life. He has come to heal, to forgive, to love. Do you believe this? Light and life to all he brings, risen with healing in his wings. Mild he lays his glory by, born that we no more may die. Born to raise us from the earth, born to give us second birth. Friends, who the heaven else is going to help us beat death? But thanks be to God who gives us the victory in Jesus Christ. Amen. This morning, I know a lot of you are dealing with some stink. Something that's binding you. Something that's keeping you in the tomb. And today, Jesus is saying to you, come out. Come out and find life. He's calling you forth. Calling you toward new birth. And it can happen today. It can happen right here at this table, where we come and we receive the grace that he offers to us. And all we have to do is reach out and receive it. Say, Lord, I'm yours. I want to receive your forgiveness. I want to receive your life. I want to receive your love. I want to know what it means to be new. So as we prepare our hearts to come to the table this morning, I want to invite you to just take a moment of silence. From what do you need to be released today? Fear, addiction, hurt, worry. And come to the table with it. He calls you. Come out. Be born anew.